Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm your host, Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On today's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talk to Jeanine Pesce, founder of Range. Range is a big name in the outdoor brand and media space, but Jeanine and her team still get asked all the time what exactly Range is. Some know it as an outdoor recreation creative agency or as trended brand consulting. Others know it as a magazine, while others know it as the center of the outdoor retailer trade show. To gain some insight, I asked Jeanine how she approaches the question of what is range.
Range was meant to be this kind of intentionally vague concept because when I started it, honestly, I didn't know what direction it would head in. Mm-hmm. My background was in trend forecasting and consulting, and I also had quite a bit of editorial experience creating content for digital sites. So I wanted to kind of combine those two passions I had, and I wasn't entirely sure which one would work. Mm. So I started consulting, picking up clients, and I also started blogging and creating content and was kind of like, let's see which one, gets more traction. And as I started doing more consulting work, that eventually started to transition into kind of more of a DIY creative agency model. And as I started doing more of the content side of the job, that actually started getting more traction. So both of these kind of different business models started growing at their own pace, and eventually I launched Range magazine as an editorial extension of our brand on the agency side.
Okay. So working in both editorial and consulting space on a day-to-day, what does that look like? Like, what is a day in the life of Jeanine?
Well, it's actually really interesting because at first I thought that they were really intrinsically linked, and technically they are. They both definitely influence the other, but they're very different business models. And it sort of dawned on me recently that I'm running two very entirely different businesses under one umbrella. Yeah. So my days are very busy. I have, a creative agency approach to the work I do on the consulting side. So, client-facing, bespoke, conceptual work that ranges from product development and color and trend forecasting to content production and other sorts of creative production like video and photo shoot production. So that's, pretty full on. We have a team that works on those projects specifically with account directors and account managers. We also manage social media for a few clients, which is a beast in itself and takes a lot of time and energy to keep those accounts running fluidly. And then on the editorial side, we have an entire separate editorial team that works on the blog and our in-house social media channels, Range, and also our magazine. And we have some goals that we're working towards on the editorial side to really build out a more dimensional digital platform because, in its current state, Range is, it's a fun blog and it's a place that we can put our thoughts, and, the magazine is essentially an extension of our brand from a marketing perspective, but we really see a lot of potential there to carve that out into something a little bit more robust.
Okay, what do you mean by dimensional?
Just kind of a little bit more rich content, a real digital destination where we have, engaging content, digital advertising opportunities, a bit more of a formal package. Right now, Range is, I would call it like 60 to 70% creative agency and probably, 30 to 40% content. And we'd like to make that a little bit more of an even breakdown.
Okay. And on that magazine side, I know you do a theme for each issue. So how do you, or what are some of those key concepts that you keep in mind when you choose a theme?
A lot of it comes from my background in trend forecasting. I'm kind of always looking at what's coming next or what is influencing the market or swinging the market in a new or different direction. So a lot of it is a gut decision based on kind of how I see things unraveling or presenting themselves in the industry. I mean, they always have the same underlying themes. Like sustainability is always a huge underlying theme for us. Activism is always a huge underlying theme for us. Accessibility is always a huge underlining theme for us. Design is always a huge underlining theme for us. But then I try to give it this spin where, like, you know, a word or the name of the theme, like you mentioned, can be interpreted in a few different ways. So the last issue was about progress, issue 10, which was really cool to celebrate our 10th issue. And, you know, the way I kind of teed it up was this: you could interpret progress very personally. It was a word that either can be taken quite literally or figuratively. It would represent something very different to each person, whether that was in relationship to product and product development and innovation, whether it was about personal progress or breaking down barriers, whether it was about being progressive and political. And, you know, it's funny, going back to the beginning of the conversation, range, you know, when I started, I wanted a word that could lend itself to a variety of things. When I started brainstorming on what to name my company, I was hiking one day and I always kind of felt like I was in the middle of these two industries. Like, I didn't really fit in the fashion industry and I didn't really fit in the outdoor industry. I was kind of in this gray area in between, and I wanted to really like come up with a word that symbolized this area or this spectrum or this range. And I started thinking about like a range of work and a range of time and a mountain range and a range of color. And I was like, wait, that's a great word. It's adaptable. It lends itself to a variety of different interpretations. And it just clicked, and I immediately knew that was the word. And I guess that's kind of the way I think about the themes for the issues. You know, it's just a word that can be, you know, interpreted in a myriad of ways, whether that's professional or personal.
Okay, that's a cool story. I like that. And how do you choose what pieces fit those themes?
It's a really interesting process, and it gets a little easier each time we do the magazine. The magazine is absolutely a labor of love. We don't necessarily make any money making it. It's, you know, definitely a passion project that we hold very dear and near to our hearts. So it's hard because we don't always have the budget to work with more established writers and photographers or content creators. So we have to be really creative about how we aggregate content. So that's why we always put a call for submissions out, encouraging our community to pitch ideas to us. And a lot of the times they're first-time writers or younger writers. So there's a bit of coaching and there's a bit of, you know, we're kind of cultivating the copy and the ideas and the pitches together, which is always really nice because we're not very rigid. You know, we have a lot of flexibility because we are a small magazine, and we do everything, you know, in-house. Oftentimes they say, you know, the magazine is a co-op, as good as what we put into it and the sum of our community, and the ideas that they provide to us. So it's very, very symbiotic in that sense. Like, I come up with the theme and the call to action, and then the community literally responds with how they've interpreted it, and then we kind of, you know, sort and sift through the pieces that are already polished, the pieces that need a little bit more support, and then the editorial team, which is amazing, including our manager, Emily Hopsian. She's our new editorial manager based in Patagonia. She really works closely with me to help streamline the process and get, you know, contributors on the same page.
Mm-hmm. And then the side of Range that I'm not as familiar with, just because of my background, is that consulting side. So I know there's a lot of different elements to it, but how do you prioritize which parts of those you focus on or that you're going to pursue right away?
Yeah, It was funny because when I started Range, I wanted to do everything. And, that's never the best way forward. My background is in trend forecasting, as I mentioned, and editorial, and I have a fashion design degree. So I had experience in, concept and trend. I had experience in physical product development, and I had experience as an editor and journalist. I had also produced a lot of photo shoots, and I really enjoyed that. So I was like, I can do all of that, let me build this model where I can do a little bit of everything I'm good at. And that's great, when you're starting. But it kind of confuses people a little bit at first. They're like, what exactly do you do? What services do you offer? It seems like you do a little bit of everything. So you have to kind of rein it in and come up with a really focused plan, your value proposition, your mission, what it is you do, and not just, oh yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. And it's also interesting because I had been doing so much work in the digital and concept space, which is really abstract. Like, it's not a lot of dimensional, like tactile work. It's more just ideas and thoughts, and it often gets very, esoteric. And I was really craving to do something a little bit more physical and tangible, which is why I started to incorporate more production and the magazine into the work I was doing, because I really wanted to get back into the field and out of the office and work with my hands and work with clients on the ground. So that was essentially how Range started. And now in its current state, it's definitely a bit more focused. We still try to, celebrate the things that excite us and work on the kinds of projects that we find to be interesting, but we kind of funnel it through a little bit more of a lens now, as opposed to just a little bit of everything. We think a little bit more about strategy and concept work as kind of the first stop. So the early development work that goes into developing and building out, and ideating on a product or a concept, consumer insights, a little bit more of that strategic thinking. And then the second stop, or the second, bucket that we fill is more the content creation side. So that whether that's, writing or content for clients or photo shoots, things like that. And then creative production is the third stop on the train for us. And usually that's brand experience or pop-up or that kind of thing. So it's fun, it's exciting, and it all really stems from our intimate understanding of the market when it comes to the outdoor active and lifestyle industries.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the industry too, because you've talked about how getting into the outdoor space was a big barrier to entry with your fashion background. So how did you, break that barrier, and how is it navigating that space today?
I persisted. Yeah. I guess you could say that I just persisted. I remember I attended Outdoor Retailer, which is a big national outdoor trade show here in the U.S. for the first time in 2005, I believe. And I had never been to an outdoor show before. I had only I'd only attended like fashion trade shows, which are very different. And I got to Salt Lake City, where it was based at the time, and I remember walking to the trade show and just being like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, it's so innovative and nerdy, and it's all about performance fabrics, and like my background in product development, it all, for me, like I just thought it was really interesting and fascinating, and everybody was really kind, and it was just something I felt like I wanted to be a part of. So I kind of just made up my mind that like I would figure out how to push my way in. And at first I worked for a company called Promo Steel, which was a French trend forecasting company out of Paris. And I was part of the team that was their U.S. representatives. And we did color consulting and product and trend consulting for a lot of the bigger brands that were showing at Outdoor Retailer, like the North Face and Columbia and Patagonia and Arc'teryx. And I just kind of dove headfirst into an industry I didn't know a ton about. I grew up in a family that I'm from Brooklyn, but my dad was an Eagle Scout and my grandfather was a hunter, and like we were an outdoorsy family for being from Brooklyn, which is kind of an interesting contrast. Mm-hmm. And I always just loved the outdoors, but I didn't have a lot of experience with it. And I just felt immediately this intrinsic connection to the space and the community and the technical side of it. And I just, decided I was going to join forces and just kind of stick around. And I really was able to carve out a path for myself as this consultant that specialized in the outdoor space in trend forecasting. There's a lot of people who work in trend forecasting in fashion and art and design and furniture, but it's really, really hard to find people who focus on the outdoor and active industry globally. I mean, there's only a few of us that do it. I didn't know that at the time. I just, like I said, I was intrinsically kind of drawn to it. So I actually unknowingly carved out this kind of niche place for myself that didn't exist. And I guess you could say I found the white space and then just kind of figured it out as I went.
And how was it different working in the outdoor community in that space instead of where you had been before?
So it was very welcoming, and it wasn't cold at all. It wasn't, people were very kind immediately. In the fashion industry, it was kind of it's fashion. Everyone's cool and everyone's inaccessible. Everyone's very busy, and it's not meant to be a welcoming environment. And in the outdoor space, everybody was like, "Hey, what's your name? Okay, cool. Where are you from? You should come hiking with us, or why don't you go skiing with us?" Or and then the next time I went back, people remembered my name, and everybody had known each other for years, it seemed like, and had these really special connections to each other. So that was, on a personal level, it was very inviting. And then on a professional level, I was very, very drawn to the innovation and the performance side of the fabric and fibers. Everything had a purpose in the outdoor space or in the active space. It wasn't just, looked great. It had to function. It was this beautiful intersection of form and function that I really love. And it appealed to both my creative side and my analytical side.
Jeanine and her family recently moved to Vancouver, but said the company will still be based in the U.S. As it turns out, the Range team is located all over the country, as well as in other areas like Patagonia.
Our team is actually all remote. Everyone is based in a different city, which is really interesting. It's great because we have people on the ground in basically all the major cities we have clients in. So Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, Colorado, in Denver, Philadelphia, New York. So we have team members spread out around the country. So we have feet on the ground, and we can kind of work in our own regions, and everyone's really a specialist in the area that they live, and how that relates back to the client.
Okay. And how is that as a manager to coordinate all of that?
It's interesting, and it was really kind of more out of necessity than out of, it wasn't a strategic decision. We started growing so quickly on the agency side that we just kept getting more clients and more projects, and I kept having to bring the best people in to work on the projects wherever they were based. As I mentioned before, the work we do is very specialized, and there's not a lot of people that do it. Mm-hmm. So when you think about color and trend forecasting for the outdoor and active market, it's not like everyone's going to be in the same place. So I just focus more on finding the best fit for the roles as opposed to finding the best locations. And it's working so far, but as we scale and get bigger, I think we're all craving to have, some time together and space together in a shared creative studio where we can all kind of come together and work in the same time zone. We're definitely nimble and remote. I guess that's two ways you can refer to it.
So last question I think I have for you. What are you most excited about for Range moving forward?
I think I'm most excited about just really letting things really focused and finally having kind of that epiphany about like what you do really well. When I started, as I mentioned, I wanted to do a little bit of everything, and I had all these big ideas, and I just realized that like over the years, I'm not going into my 6th year of business now, you can't do everything really well. You should only do a few things really well. And I feel like I finally have kind of had that aha moment of like what that exactly is and what that means to us. And I don't necessarily think that there's a business model that exists that embodies exactly what we do, which is exciting. So this is all kind of unknown territory. We're definitely exploring new frontiers here in terms of like, how we position ourselves as a company. We have a lot of potential as a female-founded company with 99%, female employees, and the power of Women United, which is incredible. We have a lot of potential to really grow and evolve into something a little bit more formal while keeping kind of our DIY structure intact. And I think just really seeing the team come together and evolve and thrive, that's been really exciting for me, and I'm excited to see kind of how that evolves in the next few years.
Jeanine carved her own path in an industry that she found her fit in. We hope you're inspired by her story to combine your skills and passions too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.